If you open up this video, your situation is probably this one. Pretty shitty, right? But today, we're gonna see how to solve this issue in a simple way in just a few minutes by only modifying your main XML file to transform this to this. As you can see, I can change the screen size and the layout of my app will remain the same. You can see the timeline of the video with all the different topics on the time bar right below. You can skip on the topic you need or follow the entire video. I strongly suggest watching the entire video because we are gonna go into the responsive layout step by step. Starting off with the basics, like in CSS, we don't want to hardcode the different dimension of our element, like in this case. And to solve this problem, we really cannot put a percentage on the width and height attributes, like in this case, but we're gonna use two different things, guidelines and the 0dp feature. Starting out with 0dp is pretty easy. It enables the given element to expand itself all the way from one constraint to the other. So, for example, if we put 0dp in the width of this element, the element will fit perfectly inside the given constraint from left to right, like this. And if we put it in the high value, it will fit perfectly from top to bottom. We can match this with guidelines. Guidelines are basically some invisible lines that we can put at a given distance that can be hard-coded or even a percentage of the screen. You can add this by right-clicking on the design window, go to Add Helper, and choose vertical guideline or horizontal guideline as you need. In our example, we will use both, but let's start with the vertical guidelines. So with guidelines, we're able to choose the percentage of the screen we want to use. For example, if we want our image centered on x-axis and we want it to be 60% of the screen, we're gonna put two guidelines. The first one with the attribute app constraint give percent set to 0.20, that means 20% of the screen, and the second one with this percentage at 0.80, so 80% of the screen. If you don't want to perfectly center your element, just try some values until you are happy with the visual result. Now that we understand how to choose where to put our guidelines, let's see how to properly use them. I'm gonna talk about images, text views, and buttons as an example to understand all the attributes we need to use for every existing element in Android Studio. So starting with images, I use pretty much only one attribute, the ratio, that enable us to maintain a constant ratio between length and width of the element. For example, if we want a square image, we should put a 1:1 ratio, and like this, for every dp of the length will be 1 dp on the height, up ratio, and that's it. So by putting 1:1, so we can see that the width and the height will maintain a 1:1 ratio. Now we just need to add the constraint to our image and put 0dp. So let's start off with 0dp. And then we want to put the constraint to our guideline. And like that, our image will be perfectly responsive. Now that the image problem is solved, let's go with the text views. Unlike the images, text don't usually need a ratio. Instead, with texts, we will run into a problem, the text size. When we make a hard-coded graphical interface, we also use attributes like the font size, and if so, the font size will not adapt itself to the screen. You can see here that our text size is 80 dp. To solve this problem, I discovered an attribute for all kinds of text called Android AutoSize text type. So let's add it. Android AutoSize text type. And by putting it to uniform, the text will automatically adapt to the dimension of the text view itself. Now, by putting the constraint on some grid lines like before, we will be able to make our text views responsive to all kinds of screens. The only problem with this is that in some really small screen sizes, such as smartwatches, the text will fuck up a little bit, just wrapping even with single words. To solve this, it is useful to add two more attributes. So let's add Android auto size min text size and set it to 1dp. And for huge screens, let's add Android auto size max text size and let's put it to 1000 dp. And now our text will be perfectly responsive. And just a quick suggestion, if we want to go next line, we can just add \n even here and the text will automatically go next line after the \n. Now, last but not least, let's talk about buttons. I had a lot of problem with buttons while I was trying to implement the responsive layout in my application, but let's start from the basics. For a normal button is really easy. You can model the shape just by adding a ratio. And I strongly suggest you 3:1, for example. And after that, we just want to use the 0dp and the 0dp here, and maybe it's a little bit too big, so you can add another grid lines here and maybe here. As I did in this layout, I added 4 grid lines for this button to be in. After that, we have to solve the text problem, and for this is pretty much the same of the text view. So let's copy these 3 attributes and paste them here. Now our layout is fully responsive. We can see that it never changed, but I still have a problem because this method works beautifully if you want to modify the shape of your button or make it transparent with a different XML file. That's perfect for you. But the real problem I run into are some types of buttons. For example, chip group, chip, checkboxes, radio group, radio buttons, and switch buttons are not responsive at all. I've also tried to make custom with different XML files, but this doesn't work either. So for this type of buttons, I don't have a solution. Sorry about that. We can also build our layout with a chain. We can have 4 types of chain: spread, spread inside, weighted, and packed. In this video, I'm gonna talk about the spread inside chain because it is the chain you will use 90% of the time. But if you want to see more, I will link the article of the official Android developer page in the description below. Making a spread inside chain is really easy and honestly not super useful, but let's make an example with 2 images, 1 and 2. So we want the bottom of 1 to be linked to the top of 2 like this. But we also want the top of this image to be linked to the upper image. This is not possible from graphic, so we have to write some code. Top to bottom of image view 3. So as you can see, this image have the reference of this image, but this image also have the reference of this image. So we created a chain. The important thing is that the end of the chain has to be connected to the parent of our screen. That's pretty easy to explain, but pretty hard to find on the internet. So this was the full course on how to implement a responsive layout without writing thousands of XML files. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, consider subscribing and leaving a like. I will do many more tutorials on this channel on Android Studio and Java in general. Also maybe some sarcastic one like Danny. but with my Android app developer journey. Thanks for the attention, and remember, we all shit in this stench.